our ancestors made pacts with the elements. Diminutive and wide-eyed, they watched and learned as the spirits cultivated the fruits of the land. In exchange, they took rounded gemstones, pics, and crushed them. Normally dense, practically indestructible, their worldly form shatters and disintegrates like glass under the pressure of intent. From within burst forth wisps of color, integrated vigorously by the patron. What couldn't be done was. Pics remains somewhat of a mystery to this day. Modern scientists have classified 3 distinct forms of pics. Bowlers, which are opaque and the largest. Shooters, translucent, sitting between the size of bowlers and eyes, which are the smallest and are clear save for a swirl of color in their center. Each form contains 100 times the energy as the size up, despite their physical appearances. The process through which they are formed remains elusive, although many theorize it has something to do with the elements themselves and how they interact with the material world. The energy pics contains is of great value to the elements, and yet sits just out of their reach. Only material beings can crack the carapace of pics, a fact that has fueled commerce between us and them for generations. Ancient peoples believed this energy to be the element's main source of sustenance, but modern accounts suggest otherwise. Those who know the elemental tongue understand that this energy, colloquially referred to as mana, is a manifestation of life itself. The stewards of the land use it to push forward the wheel of rebirth, turning decay into new growth, loss into opportunity, hope everlasting. Despite this, there is rarely a need to crush pics nowadays. In ages past, elements could do for cheap what would be expensive or impossible for mundane folk. Today, with the help of technology, this relationship is flipped. Being that their value is always backed by the demand of the elements, pics are regularly traded as a form of currency in the modern era, void of the downfalls of gold and other commodities by virtue of the element's enduring valuation. This puts a price ceiling on most goods and services across Ormauk. After all, if you need only crush a handful of shooters to fell a tree, why pay the lumberjack an eye? It is clear the destruction of pics is of vital importance to the elements. As such, their supply at a regional scale is monitored closely by economists. When there is too much pics in the pockets of the people, we pull them to be crushed as part of ancient rituals. This also seems to influence the natural occurrence of new pics in the wilds, fueling the avarice of adventurers looking for their next score. Crushed pics is steadily replaced by the handfuls hauled back by the daring. Some folks make a career out of delving into the depths of the world, searching for tiny baubles in the nooks and crannies. While milder people would likely crush pics no more than a few times in their lives, adventurers must do so often as the dangers of the darkest wilds may sometimes only be cheated by the might of the elements. Greenhorns wonder endlessly why the elements insist on putting pics just past the most dangerous of hazards. Seasoned veterans know that there's no fun in a free lunch. In any world-building project, currency is one of the vital parts of the world that you kind of want to get right for the most part, since currency affects so much of the world, the various cultures within it, and the inhabitants that utilize it. It affects how people live, how places run, group relations, and so much more. rooting our ideas in solarpunk ideals, but with an urban fantasy cast of characters. I was a bit scared to tackle this issue because of the implications of resource management, capitalist ideals, and all kinds of baggage that comes with money. I had to keep reminding myself that money is simply a tool, and that it isn't evil just by itself. Putting those concerns aside, we were able to play around with some fun ideas in terms of what we wanted the currency in Ormauk to look like. We knew we wanted something simple that can exist throughout a massive disk world like Ormauk, and have its value stay consistent throughout the many, many kinds of groups and people that would use it. Paper money, or any form of fiat currency, would suggest a disk-wide governing body that would control this currency, so that idea was also a no-go. We pulled it back a little and leaned towards the fantasy elements of the setting and landed on some form of ore or crystal that could be used to feed or commune with the elements. This developed into the concept of pics containing condensed pockets of mana that would have been used to work or control the elements in a pre-industrialized age of Ormauk in order to achieve things that would normally be impossible for people. Because of the inherent power of pics, it would surely be valued by most of Ormauk's inhabitants and used throughout the ages as some form of currency. Commodity currency typically has a drawback, which is that its value is subject to change, especially when the commodity itself is scarce. Pics avoids this issue through its relation with the elements. Slow to change and very long-lived, elements value the energy within pics roughly the same, and so we imagine them to request pretty much the same amount of mana for any particular task, no matter where you are in Ormauk or however many years pass. We also played around with how pics would come to be and came up with a couple ideas like the spindles releasing pics dust as a byproduct of weaving the disk world into existence, and having these dust accumulate into the spheres. We also thought of having elements release waste energy to raw earth and have that turn to pics. However, we ended up leaning more towards the elements having the ability to erode the material plane as they travel through it as incorporeal beings. Essentially, having their movements polish physical material into pics. Pics itself can also get polished as elements moved against it and refining it into more valuable, more condensed pics. We knew we wanted 3 different kinds of pics in varying value so we can denote currency as XX, decimal YY, decimal ZZ, which is a play on the classic fantasy copper, silver, and gold currency. Additionally, we didn't start with the pics looking like marbles. We toyed around with other variations, continuing with the light-hearted but grounded approach that we've had to designing the various animals, people, locations, and objects within Ormauk. We took inspiration from various childhood games or objects found in board games for this. As you can see from the early sketch stage of the drawing, I used different kinds of dice to denote the 3 different tiers of pics using D4, D6, and D12 dice. We also played around with jackstone pieces for the design, and stackable geometric shapes as well as starburst designs for each tier of the pics. But ultimately we landed on the marbles. One of the main reasons why I wanted to go with the marbles was because of how much I wanted to eat them as a kid. The elements consuming the energy from within gave the same vibe, and from there it was all about differentiating each tier from one another. Starting with a rough, earthen crust Tier 1, the bowler would be the most common type of pics found in Ormauk. I used this nice striped agate rock swirls on it to make it stand out despite technically being the lowest tier of pics. A tier above the bowler is the translucent shooter. My main goal for this one was to suggest some kind of material within it. Still having some of the stripes from the bowler tier, the shooter has a foggy glass look that gives you a peek at what's truly contained within these pics. Finally, the highest tier of pics, the eyes, bears it all in transparency. You can see the swirling mass of mana within it, protected by a clear glassy orb that refracts light as it passes through it. In modern day Ormauk, people don't usually use pics in their day-to-day life. But if a large amount of mana is needed to be used for high quantity trading, carrying all these pics would be quite a hassle. This is where the credit carrier comes in. Strips of mana storing film are stored into these carriers to allow users to carry far more mana than one normally could by handling pics. Pics can be crushed and mana beamed through the film to be stored or taken as needed. I played around with the aesthetic of cassette tape technology for the credit carrier since it struck a good balance of reliable feeling tech and familiarity. I thought that this would be a good line of direction to follow for technology in Ormauk, since I really wanted technology to feel like it would be accessible to a lot of Ormauk's inhabitants. I'll probably reserve more high-tech designs for specific groups in Ormauk to visually distinguish them later on. Overall, I was really pleased with how this piece turned out. I had a specific vision in my head of how I wanted to depict the credit carrier in the pics, and I was able to achieve it. For my next piece, I will be doing another character design. I'll be looking into drawing a fisherman of Liluan. This is related to the fish poster I created for the previous video and the project that I hinted I'll be working on for the next little while. If you're still here, thanks for listening all the way to the end, and make sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to see our progress on our little project, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.